So, calculator is working. So I want to talk about a little bit about the way the unemployment is counted. Okay, so retired don't count as unemployed. Disabled don't count as unemployed. Right? Kids under 18 don't count as unemployed. Ready? You're gonna be amazed. College students don't count as unemployed. Right? So, we're going to talk about a few things that would cause the unemployment rate to improve. Okay, putting more people. Disability means less unemployed. Right? More funding for college grants from government means less unemployed. Okay, because full-time students don't count as unemployed. Right? So these are all things that are true. Okay. So when you increase government funding for disability, and you increase government funding for college grants, the unemployment rate will get better. Okay, because all these people that before were unemployed, suddenly they're now counted as students and disabled people. So if you cut all the funding for disability, you cut all the funding for full-time students, you're going to have a lot of people that suddenly become unemployed. So you're going to have a very short, burst of high unemployment increase. Right? So what you see is you have this trajectory, low unemployment, and then you have cutting, so here's the green is, unemployment, and then the orange is going to be government funding to public programs. So, you have low, or so you have middle level of government funding, you have middle level of unemployment. So government funding suddenly is cut. The unemployment will go way up because all these people here and all these people here suddenly are not students or disabled anymore. Right? So you have this massive increase, in unemployment benefits, being dished out to people, or you just have a bunch of people who used to be full-time students, now they're not. So the unemployment goes up. And then you cut funding to these programs, and then, this unemployment spikes here. Okay. So now I increase funding to disability and college grants. Suddenly these people are disabled or students, so the unemployment rate goes back down. So here you have a causation, proven causation in short term, more funding to gov programs decreases unemployment. Okay. More funding to government programs decreases less unemployment when there's more funding to government programs. So this is something that has been proven in the short term, right? So we continue and we say, eek. So this is like science, right? So what we say is, if you keep the funding low, some of these people will go back to work. Right. So what you have is you're seeing a ratio of government funding to employment that these Republicans like, because maybe half the people here that were considered unemployed when you cut these programs, let's say half of them find a job, right? So you have a temporary increase of employment that is accompanied by also a decrease in government funding. So this is kind of what the graph looks like this, right? So what you can do here, as a government official, is you know kind of what will happen. You have this incubation period where after about 2 weeks, these people are going to get their jobs back. So if you do something right here, like implement, suddenly tax cuts, and then this unemployment changes, okay, this doesn't mean the tax cuts caused the change in employment. Because these numbers would have changed regardless. Make sense? So these people would have gone back to work. It doesn't matter if you also did the tax cuts. Okay, so if you take out the tax cuts, okay, all of these people still go back to work. Right? So what you have to do is you have to perform the experiment in isolation. Okay? You have to do it like this. So we don't cut the benefits. And the employment stays the same. Right. So what we do is, we add, we cut taxes. Okay. And then we say, oh, the number of people working went up. Right? So we only have a few months window to, to look. So we cut taxes, the number of people working goes up. Okay, so remember, this isn't necessarily always a good thing. These people could be producing, stuff like this. Now there's more people working. That doesn't mean it's a good thing. Okay, so we need to establish, first of all, that just more people working isn't necessarily a positive thing all the time. Okay, so we need to remember that. It's just a number. It doesn't mean good or bad. Okay, the only reason it's good is because we want to reduce funding to government programs so that big businesses can get more profit. So only in that context is, this unemployment stuff, mostly considered good, right? So you cut taxes and the employment increases and the funding stays the same. So what you say is, the tax cuts, helped these people get jobs, but that's not necessarily true. Okay, so people got scared, and went to work. Okay, so the tax cuts could have nothing to do with actually helping the businesses, hire more people. Okay, the tax cuts just made the people scared, so they went and got a job. Right? So you can't prove that the tax cuts actually helped, cause more people to be hired. People just got scared because they thought government's going to cut, so they went and found a job. Okay, so cutting taxes it creates fear. The people, right? So here's kind of what you have in foreign countries. We may go back to this later. I'm just showing you how this stuff works. Like, you can't necessarily prove why more people are working. There's way too many factors involved. Okay, you can guess why, but you can't prove it. Okay, could be fear, it could be, all kinds of things that have nothing to do with the tax cuts. Okay, so we have historical data. Okay, at times in country where there was the most disparity of wealth, the most number of poor, and the least number of wealthy. Okay, but very small amount of extremely wealthy people. Okay, this is always, there's enough evidence to say that this is, pretty much proven. Okay, always occurs when income tax is low. Example is Great Depression. Okay, so this is proven fact. Okay, the most disparity of wealth, the most number of poor, the least number of wealthy, and a very small amount of extremely wealthy people always occurs when income tax is low. This is proven by the Great Depression. So if you want to look this up yourself, you're very welcome to, but you won't find anything different than what I'm telling you. Okay? So we go back to employment, and government spending being placed next to each other. Okay, so here you have spending. Here you have employment. Right? So, here's what Obama did. Okay. Government funds green energy startups. Building personal solar panels, building windmills, building energy sources independent of, fossil fuels, which is oils and carbon stuff, and, coal and things. So government funds green energy startups that are, doing green energy stuff. If you were trying to do research for electric cars, you would have gotten government funding. So you have government funding going way up. The employment goes exactly the same direction. Right? So you have government funding leads to an increase in employment. Okay. So that's kind of what Obama did. So let's say, government funds construction projects. Each county required to have homeless shelters that can sustain, right, and government hires the workers to build, these buildings. Right? So you have government funding the construction of shelters, and so the spending is going up, and they're hiring the employees to do the construction. So the employment is also going up. Right? So what we have is, see here, government, hires teachers, requires each, county has public schools, has schools, that can educate all all children. So this is something that happened a while ago, and I'm sure there were just as many people who said it was a bad idea back then as are saying, that it's a bad idea to do all these other programs. So you have government hires teachers, builds public schools. So suddenly you have all these construction workers are getting jobs, all these school teachers are getting jobs. Okay, so government spending is leading to an increase in employment. Make sense? So here's what I'm saying. Okay, when you spend to increase employment, it allows the government and the people to vote on what kinds of jobs they want to create, and what they want to do as a society. Right? When you give tax breaks, it's the same thing as government spending. Okay, except the people can't vote on the kinds of jobs they want to create. Okay, and most people don't get enough money to do any, any real type projects. Right. So what you say is you give $100 to 10,000 people. What do? They go to a movie, buy wine, buy dinner. Okay. Or you give, 10 million, or, 1 million, whatever it was that was the equal amount of money. Or you give equal money, to a government official who builds a homeless shelter. So from my perspective, option B is preferable. This is better than just having a bunch of people go to a movie and buy wine and go to dinner. Right, so this is, if you have any kind of, sympathy at all for the less fortunate, this option down here is far more preferable. Okay. Okay, so the only difference between giving tax breaks and spending is that we are sacrificing the control to make sure that the American people can see what is being done with the money and can ensure that the money is being used for something good and not just getting a bunch of people drunk. Okay, so the reality of the situation is, if you give the tax breaks, no one can see what you're doing with the money. No one can know what you're doing with it. So this tends to happen far more often with the tax breaks. Okay, so in the government, everyone can see how you're spending the money. So this doesn't usually happen. Everyone sees what you're doing with the money. This kind of thing doesn't usually happen. Right? So what tends to happen here is they tend to do things that most people in country see as good. Homeless shelters, funding for veteran programs, veteran benefits, programs, for all kinds of things, programs for, help for elderly, retired individuals. Like, you're telling me that, what we prefer is this here. We prefer this instead of this. We want these things, and we want these things, and we want these things, we want these things, and we're not, we don't want this. Right? So we're saying, it's been proven that if you just give money to the people, they don't really do anything constructive with it, because they don't really have enough money or intelligence to know what really to do with it. So they tend, when you give tax breaks, and this is proven, you're going to see this happen, okay? When you give tax breaks, most people tend to just buy things for themselves, and go out, or give money away, to some, random charity, that they don't know much about and can't control in any way, what the charity is doing. Okay, so let me explain something to you. Okay, in the government, you have an employee, an employee who is very smart. Okay, and their full-time job is to figure out who needs help and give help to those people. Okay, make sense? Government. Very smart, and they have ability to use, police to enforce the money is spent on the people who actually need help. Okay, and when you give to a private charity, okay, this is what most people don't know. Okay, when you give to a private charity, there is no law that requires that the charity spends any money on their cause. Okay, they can keep it all, no issue. This is the reality. So when you donate to a private charity, there is zero guarantee that the people will actually get the money. Right? So this is not a reliable way to help anyone. Make sense? So, government employee who is very smart, their full-time job is to figure out who needs help and give help to those people. Okay, and they can use police to enforce, the money is spent on the people who actually need help. Right, so if a, if a government employee steals money from a charity fund, they get in trouble. Right? Ronald Reagan stole from government charity. So, right? Reagan stole from government charity funds to give tax breaks to the wealthy. Okay, so we remember what we set up here. When you give tax breaks, most people just buy things for themselves. They go out to the bar, they give money away to some random charity that, there is no guarantee that those people are not required by law to actually spend that money on the charitable cause. Okay, so we can't control in any way what the charity is doing with our money. They can keep it all for themselves, right? So these things where people, don't trust government to spend money on the poor, everything that people tend to mistrust government with is actually, being done by private charity and Republicans, who steal from charity funds and give tax breaks to the wealthy. To billionaires. With no guarantee, that they can do anything good with the money. Right, so this is kind of the factual information that we have available to us. Alright, so that's the facts. Okay, so now you have seen the facts. Right? So we're going to graph again, use these, government spending, employment numbers. Okay, so if government hires a bunch of people, the employment goes up. So when the government hires a bunch of people, you are being taxed, and your money is being used to give other people a job. So this is the same as you going to the bar and losing money is the same as you being taxed and paying for your kids' education. Okay, so when you vote for tax breaks, you're saying, I prefer this option, and I don't want this option. So you prefer to just throw away your money at the bar, and then your kids can't go to school. Make sense? So we have the government increasing spending, hiring teachers, hiring police, hiring all these things, paying military officers, and then the unemployment, more people are employed because the government is spending money. Okay, so let me explain something to you. All money in the entire country is from government spending. Okay. If the government never spent money, there would be no money. This is what we need to understand. All money in the entire country is from government spending. If the government never spent money, there would be no money. Right, so let's explain this. When the country starts, there is no money, just land. Okay, so the government prints credits, that can be redeemed later on, for things, like, buying things from Gov. This is like the foundation of the country. Okay, the government is printing credits, that can be redeemed later on, to buy things from the government. So this is like, if you join our army, we will give you these credits. We give you these credits. When war is over, we can sell you land over here, based on how many credits you have. So this continues, and the government prints these credits to convince the people in the country to do things, like, build hospitals, dig wells, etc. We will give you the credits to buy food. Just go and start, digging these wells. We're gonna, you can go build hospitals, you can go dig wells, you don't have to farm food because the government will give you the credits you need to buy food from the farmers. Right, so the government says, to the farmers, go plant your crop. Don't worry, about other things. We are giving credits to, these sheriffs, and they will protect your land, and, don't worry about buying tools, etc. Don't worry about ... So this is where the money this is where all the money came from. Okay, every tiny little bit of money that exists within the entire country is purely created by when government prints credits to convince the people to do certain things. Okay, so all money is created by government spending. From the beginning of time, from the very beginning, of our country, all money was created purely by government spending, and government funded programs. Okay, so here's how the government spending works. Okay, you have these people in government and they say, things are going bad. But people, actually, view the government credits as having value, and they are using them for trade, because they want to come back and buy land from the government. Right, so people actually view these credits as having value. So we can give credits to these people over here, and have them, build, a bunch of stuff. We have them build a courthouse. Etc. Now we have a town, and if you want credits, you come to the courthouse, and then we give you credits, and you do one of the jobs that we want to be done as the government. So this is where all money comes from. Is this, so you can read this, pause the video, read this again. This is where all money comes from. Is government, giving credits for people to do jobs. Right? So basically all government spending leads to increases in employment. This is something that is, pretty much factual. Not quite 100% guaranteed, but, most of all government spending leads to increases in employment. Okay, so here's an example. Give food stamps to disabled person. This person goes to the store to buy food, comma, farmer now has job. Guy who cleans and stocks store now has job. Okay, because disabled person got food stamps. Okay, so what you say is we take away the food stamp card and we give this guy a job. But where's the money coming from to pay him? Okay, it's coming from when the government gave soldiers money to join army. Now this disabled person has a job. So if we cut government funding, the soldiers don't have money, the soldiers don't need food, the disabled person doesn't have a job. Okay. So there is no job unless the government gives funding. Right? So here is the problem. Here is why giving tax breaks to wealthy will cause the entire economy to collapse. Okay. Basically guaranteed. Right? Well, I'll show you. Just keep watching. Okay, so I give $100 to 50 people. Okay, they all go buy stuff, and this gives jobs to the people who were working to build that stuff. Right, so the job numbers are safe. Right, so if you give a little bit of money to a lot of people, this is what happens. Everyone's still fine. Job numbers are up. Okay. I give, 10 billion to one person instead. He can't go to the movies, 4 billion times. 1 billion times. So everyone at movie has less work. Make sense? Okay, so we give 10 billion to government. They build shelters. Everyone has jobs building shelters. Right? So let's say we give 1 billion to this guy. Okay, he builds hotels. Everyone has jobs building hotels. Okay? And then, people go to hotel using money that he gave them. And he gets, money back. Okay, so tell me, what is the difference here? What is the difference between giving 1 billion to the guy who's going to build hotels and giving 1 billion to the government that's going to build homeless shelters? Okay, in both situations, you have people working and to build the stuff, jobs. Okay, you have, it's the same amount of money being spent. Okay, so you have the same ability to pay employees in both situations. Okay, so if you have this guy who's going to build a hotel, the difference is this doesn't help the sick and the poor. As much. Okay, if you have government homeless shelters being built, this helps sick and poor more. So it's really that simple in terms of, if you want to give tax breaks to the wealthy, it's because you don't give a shit about, the sick and poor. So if you're a Republican, you don't care about sick and poor. You just want to give some wealthy guy hotels, and then the people who are healthy and can easily work get more money. And the poor are left behind. Okay, so which, party you're voting for is very indicative of, if you actually care about the sick and the poor people, all of them. Right? So what we say is, well, if we give, more taxes to government, they can just, they become powerful, and we have Nazi Germany all over again. Okay, so I'm going to say this. Okay, if we give money to wealthy, they will bribe our government, and we will have Nazi Germany all over again. Okay, so either one of these is perfectly acceptable as something to be afraid of. Okay, so what we need to remember is the Nazis came out of the private sector. Okay, Nazis came out of private business. Nazis came out of and were funded, by private business. Okay, so you give money to people outside of government, they can influence the decision-making of the government by bribing them. So you give money to people outside of the government, they can just bribe the government into doing what they want. Right? So this entire argument, we'll leave this here. This entire argument, is based on the idea that the private wealthy businessmen are of higher morality than government officials, and allowing them to bribe officials is better than just letting the officials do what they think is best. So if you're a Republican, this is what you think. So this is what the Republicans. So this is why Republicans demonize government, and praise businesses. Okay, so they want you to believe that private wealthy businessmen are of higher morality than government officials. And allowing these private businessmen to bribe the officials is better than just letting the officials do what they think is best. So this is the entire Republican argument, is grounded in this one thing right here. Okay, so what we say here is, according to Christianity, Okay, love of money is the root of all evil. Okay, government is in debt. So just based on this fact, government can't be evil. If we're looking at it in isolation, the government there's evidence the government's not evil. It's because it's in debt. Okay, government is not making profit. Is not evil based on this verse. Right? Because they're in debt. They don't have any money. So from this, at least looking at it in that direction, so these businessmen are very wealthy. Very wealthy, seek money above all else, and are evil based on this verse. So we're just looking at in isolation, very simple, businessmen are wealthy, seek money above all else, evil based on this verse, right? So, just based on love of money, root of all evil, blah, 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 if we're just looking at it from this perspective, you can argue government is not evil, they're all in debt. Okay? So here's the next, Christ refers to businessmen as robbers and thieves. Okay. Refers to government as God's servants. So if you believe that it is safer or better to give tax breaks to private citizens or businessmen, especially, who are robbers and thieves, okay, it means you have zero faith in Christianity at all. This is the only explanation.